Welcome to History on Drugs. This is part two of our Opium Wars episode. If we pick up where we left off, basically, Western powers, led by Great Britain, primarily Great Britain, was essentially raping China of all its money, crushing their military, and forcing their people to buy their opium, which China had outlawed prior to the Opium Wars, to make up for a trade deficit, right? So essentially, China didn't want anything from anybody, but they were selling a lot of shit to people, right? They were selling porcelain, silk, and tea primarily, and everybody was buying it. And because China spent hundreds of years leading up into the mid 19th century of gathering the world's silver, the rest of the world wanted it back. And they're like, hey, we're buying all this stuff from you. You're not buying from us. So this trade deficit created an atrocity, a horrible situation, which is known as the Opium Wars. Now, following the first Opium War, which would end in 1842, China would go through a period known as the period of humiliation. And it would last all the way till the end of World War II in the 1940s, which is crazy. So for 100 years, Western powers, led by Great Britain, just turned China into a playground to sell their stuff, make money, push opium, a powerful drug, opiate, like throwing Oxycontin onto the population. And as we discuss, it's not quite as strong, but it's crazy. It's just crazy. And the more research you do on this topic, there's not a lot of it, right? Because you can't really get into the Chinese archives and you can't find their perspective, and they're humiliated, so they don't release a lot of stuff. Obviously, with the internet and modern journalists and just the sharing of information, you can find some stuff, but it's not like Great Britain's like, yeah, we did this horrible shit. There's very few articles and journalists or research and archives that says, yes, what we did is bad. As a matter of fact, in a lot of the research, they don't even talk about how bad it was by pushing opium. It was almost like in the Civil War in America, where people today that like want to defend the South, like the Civil War wasn't about slaves. It was about states' rights. We talk about this all the time. States' rights to own slaves. Anyways, it's a horrible thing that Western powers did to China. But let's just summarize the Second Opium War. So after the Treaty of Changxing, I can never pronounce these things. There was a treaty. It basically made them, after the first Opium War, it ended 1842. You're going to open up 5 ports. Not a lot was said about opium in that treaty, so it's still a gray area, but that was the whole point, to keep selling it. And they needed ports, so they're like, you're going to open up more ports. You're going to pay us like $20 million. You're going to give us Hong Kong. And Great Britain basically just demoralized China's economy and the people, and just kept pushing opium. So a decade goes by, and in that decade, more opium is being sold, right? And then France and Russia and America, they're getting into the game, right? So everybody's just trying to get all that silver back from China. China is just fading out as a superpower, and they lost their hold on what they thought that they were the center of the universe. So in 1856 to 1860, the Second Opium War would be fought. So it's 4 short years, really like 3.5 years. And the main factor, the incident that kicked it off, much like the First Opium War, this is bullshit. It's just that the Western powers wanted more control if they didn't have enough already. But there was a ship off the coast of Canton called the Arrow. It was a registered British ship, but Chinese officials looked at it as a smuggling ship, as a pirate ship, and they just took them prisoners. They're like, you can't do this, lower your British flag, and we're going to take you prisoners. And that didn't sit well with Great Britain. And at the time, Great Britain was trying to elect a new prime minister who really wanted more business out of China. And they were also fighting some rebellions in India, so they weren't really focused on it. But then the capture of the Arrow, the pirate ship, by the Chinese, the Qing dynasty, really pissed them off. So this incident, and plus France was going around the world spreading Catholicism, and they had missionaries in China, and a French missionary was decapitated. So you take those two incidents, and it gave Western powers a reason to like, let's go to war, which is just crazy. It's not a reason to go to war. It might be a reason to sit down and do some diplomacy, but they went to war. So here come the British warships. They come in, they put troops on the ground, and in less than 3.5 years, they basically bring China once again to their knees. And the driving force behind this was because they wanted to sell more shit to China. And that shit is opium. Okay? A powerful drug. So the Qing dynasty has to surrender once again. So 10 years after they surrender again. Now we get two treaties. We get the Convention of Peking and then the Treaty of Tianjin, which I'm sure I'm saying it wrong, just like the first Opium War treaty. But basically now it goes, you're gonna give us more money. You're gonna give us like another $6, $7, $8, $10 million, whatever it was. Instead of 5 ports, you're gonna open up 10 ports. Oh, and I know there was a gray area around opium. Opium is now going to be legal for us to sell. So we don't want any more bullshit. And we're also going to allow our civilians to integrate into the Chinese society, which was something that China, like, throughout their history, they didn't want people coming in. They didn't want people learning the language. They didn't want to integrate. They had their own culture, their own beliefs. And this was really devastating to the Chinese people. So now British people could roam free. The Western people could roam free. And more importantly, if these people committed some kind of crime, the British government would deal with the penalties in any court they have to go to, right? So basically they're just spreading imperialism, and they can't take over China because it's so big and so many people, but they're trying to control it. So this just allowed more opium to be sold to the Chinese people. Now, during the Opium Wars and right after the Second Opium War, it's believed that like 25% of Chinese men were addicted to opium. That's millions of people. It's crazy. Talk about history on drugs. This is an incredible story. And I wish there was just more like incidents and more depth to some of the research, but there's not. So any positives that come out of this for China? There's a guy, Sir Robert Hart. He's from Northern Ireland. He comes in during the Second Opium War into China, and he starts working in the customs office. And so this guy would be instrumental and paramount for the future of the Chinese economy into the 20th century and beyond. What he would do is start organizing and strategizing on how to centralize their custom tax on all the products and the opium that the Western powers were trying to sell. So now this Irish guy feels bad for the Chinese people. He didn't like what everybody was doing. So he's like, okay, let's set up all these custom offices. Let's keep the books. Let's charge a tariff, which is kind of like what's going on today. If you follow U.S. politics, our president, he's trying to raise the import tax to all the products in the countries we do business with. It doesn't matter what side you're on, whether you think it's right or wrong. Sure, a lot of these countries charge the U.S. tax. That is certainly the case. So we'll see what's going to happen with that. The higher we charge for products to come in from other countries, those products go up. So if you think about all the imports from China and Europe and all the cars that come in and all the manufacturing pieces that are sourced overseas and that come back, and the steel and the aluminum, all these taxes are going to go up. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But that same strategy is what Sir Robert Hart put together for China. And so it wouldn't happen right away, but over time, China would start collecting back money on creating these import tax, and they would be able to stabilize their economy and invest in their future. So opium was the key to all of this, and it's a disaster that millions of people had to get addicted to drugs because China was like the last playground of the world exploration that wasn't taken over, or the imperial powers of Great Britain didn't colonize, or America didn't get involved with. Like, we didn't like colonize like Great Britain did, like every Caribbean Far East island they would take over. Sure, we took over Guam, we took over Hawaii. Right now our president's trying to take Greenland because of all their resources, but China was so big and vast that Great Britain really couldn't just capture it like they did with other countries. And that's why they struggled with India, because it was like the same kind of problem. So many people, so big, so many rebellions that you could try to capture little pieces of it, but to capture the whole thing is going to be a big deal. So it wouldn't be until after World War II that finally Russia, France, America, Great Britain were ixnayed from China. There were some treaties after World War II. Finally, the strong grip they had on beating up and controlling and manipulating the Chinese economy would be over. But it would leave China in a position to be like, yo, what the fuck? Seriously. So I know we look at China as like, oh, this big communist country. Yeah, and I'm sure there's some bad shit there, but the world, and by the world, all the big powers basically just beat them up, bullied them, took their money, forced drugs on them for like 100 years. Like, what do you expect them to do, right? So there's a reason why they're so isolated, and they have and the government's into all their businesses, right, to protect it, right? And I know that they have military operations and spy stuff that may or may not be what we hear on the news about it, but you can almost understand and sympathize and empathize a little bit with China for what the world put them through. And it wasn't just to take land and resources, it was selling them drugs. It was pushing drugs on their people. So generations of addiction were created by the Opium Wars, and it's horrendous. So that's the Opium Wars. I hope you learned something. As always, shoot us an email at historyondrugspodcast@gmail.com. Any questions or comments, and thanks for all your support.